let's get to the most important topic of the week, which may also be the most important topic of this year, actually. Adam Smith Connor. You may remember I've talked about his case a lot on this show over the years. This is a chap, an army veteran, a father, who was arrested for silently praying in his own head. Now, his case went to court this week, and we now have a verdict. So I'm going to introduce Lois McClatchy-Miller from ADF to talk about it. Lois, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Not the best circumstances. Adam has been found guilty of, I don't want to misquote the judge here, guilty of an act of disapproval of abortion.
That's right. Well, this is an era-defining ruling, really. This is the first time that somebody has been convicted for a silent thought, in essence, in their head. There was a local buffer zone in Bournemouth in which Adam prayed silently in his head. It banned expressions of approval or disapproval of abortion. And he was approached by officers while he was in that zone who asked him about the nature of his prayer, quite Orwellian to have to go through that interrogation. It led to 2 years of legal proceedings, 3 days of trial, and now the judge has ruled that yes, indeed, he broke that buffer zone by expressing approval or disapproval of abortion in his head.
This is difficult to contemplate. Let's have a look at how it all began.
We just wanted to sort of come over and just say hello in the first instance, but
Sure.
also just inquire to your activities for today.
Well, I'm praying.
Just for your awareness, you are in an area which is governed by a public space protection order. I don't know if you're aware.
I am aware.
Of that public space protection
Yeah.
order. They also call it a safe zone. There are signs located in the area just to make you aware of that and the area where certain activities are prohibited.
Sure. Yes.
In terms of that, can I ask what is the nature of your prayer today?
What is the nature of that? I'm praying for my son.
I'm gonna pause that there because I'm already. Can I ask you, what is the nature of your prayer? We have police asking people in the street, in a public space, what is the nature of the prayer? In what way are you communicating with your God? We've already crossed the Rubicon. That's already a step too far. Now, Adam says in the video he's praying for his son. His son happened to, he aborted his son 22 years ago, and it's something that lives on his conscience, and he prays about a lot. And I think that anyone with a decent amount of empathy can understand why Adam was praying about that. But the euphemisms that the police officer uses there when she says this is a safe zone, well, it's clearly not safe for Adam. It's clearly not safe for Adam's son. Who is it safe for?
Absolutely right. No, and it gets to the heart of the issue that we're not allowed to speak about and now not allowed to think about. Now, we can all see that Adam has a pro-life view, a conscience about abortion that is at odds with what the government thinks about abortion, with what the state authorities think. The irony is, if Adam had been shouting loudly about climate change or wars in the Middle East or any other topic like that, he would have been allowed to express his views. If he'd been praying silently about his family members or what he might have for lunch that day, that would have been allowed too. But it's because it's about this specific topic of abortion and his view on it that his prayers were deemed enough for these officers to come over and interrogate him.
And he was arrested explicitly for praying. We have the footage here. We've seen it. I've read the court order. Now, people who are watching this video will say, no, he was in breach of a protection order. What is a public space protection order, and what does that mean?
So these are zones that the local authority puts in place. They weren't directed against Adam personally or anything like that. It was a zone in which nobody is allowed to engage in harassment. Of course, you're not allowed to engage in harassment anywhere. And you're not allowed to engage in expressing approval or disapproval of abortion. Now, it's not just a little bit in front of the clinic where the pavement is. It's a large zone covering several streets where they have said that you cannot express approval or disapproval. Now, this is quite a broad concept. Law should be very clear and defined. People should know if they're going to be breaking it or not. But with this very vague language, it isn't clear. Can two adults have a consensual conversation about abortion on the street? Can a mother say to her daughter, are you sure you want to go through with this? Or can you simply think or pray about the issue as you pass by the clinic or as you stop for a few minutes to pray? The law is unclear. And of course, Adam would have thought that he was on the right side of the law by not saying anything at all, not being perceived as praying. But the judge noted specifically in her judgment that he said that his hands were clasped just like this. and that he may have had his head bowed. And she thought that that may be enough for people to perceive that he's praying, and therefore enough to convict him.
So this isn't to prevent harassment or intimidation. This is to prevent disapproval of abortion. So that disapproval is a thought, it's an idea, it's an opinion, it's a state of mind. So it's not about actively doing anything to prevent abortion. It's about not agreeing with people going for an abortion. I'll quote the judge here directly from the judgment. Case law is clear that behaviours being undertaken outside of the clinic can reasonably be interpreted as opposition or disapproval. The judge goes on, it is incorrect to suggest activities in this context cannot be detrimental just because they are silent. So there's this idea that having a disapproving opinion of abortion can be detrimental to someone who's seeking an abortion. So this entire law is about protecting abortion. It's not about protecting women, vulnerable women or otherwise, not about protecting babies, it's about protecting abortion.
It's not about protecting women at all. Firstly, because every pro-lifer I know, and certainly ADF, stands strongly against harassment in any circumstance of women anywhere. So it's certainly not about that, because that's already illegal. And it's actually to the detriment of many women who have come forward and said that they benefited from pro-life volunteers being in the street near abortion facilities where they needed them, because they were able to find out information about services available, charities who were able to give economic or social support to women who would like to continue their pregnancies if they only had that option. We know from BBC polling that 15% of women who go to an abortion facility don't feel that they are doing it because of pressure on them. That shouldn't be the case. Whether you're pro-life or pro-choice or however you identify, no woman should be going to have an abortion if that's not what she wants. And so pro-life volunteers traditionally would stand in the street and offer information or offer a conversation or a prayer to women who would like to engage with them. Right. That's their right to do so. Right. That's their, and who is the government to tell these women that they cannot have access to information that they want to hear? They cannot stop to pray with a volunteer or a priest or whoever might be there for them. I think it's very intimidating or very infantilizing of women to say that they must go along with the choice that is presented to them and they cannot seek other options.
So you're not allowed to have an informed opinion, essentially, because you're only allowed to have one opinion, which is that abortion is a good thing. You're not allowed to hear anyone express or even silently show a disapproval of this thing. Livia Tosiki-Bolt is another client of yours at ADF who was holding a sign that says she was here to talk if you want to. That's it. Here to talk if you want to. That seems quite compassionate and helpful. Now, she was also arrested near an abortion facility in Bournemouth, and local authorities charged her with for being in the buffer zone. Adam, the chap who we're talking about today, was not holding a sign, was not expressing any physical disapproval, yet has still been found guilty. So it's both sides. It's having an opinion and expressing it that are the issue here. Where do we go from here? Has Adam got any recourse for an appeal?
Well, we are hastily looking through the judgment. We want to take some time to consider everything that's happened and what's in the ruling, and we are certainly considering an appeal at ADF UK if we can support that. That will be an interesting one to watch, so do that. But there's more updates on the buffer zones front coming soon. On October 31st, the British government will actually roll out abortion buffer zones across the country around every abortion facility. And so we could well see many more of these cases where innocent people who are simply thinking or offering a conversation may be caught up, swept up in this legislation, which is far too vague, far too broad, and risks interfering with basic human rights to freedom of speech and freedom of information and freedom to pray, freedom of religion, to think freely as well. Something that Britain is known for was the Magna Carta, was this history of democracy and human rights. And yet here we are in 2024 acting like we're in 1984. It's really appalling on the international front, and I do hope that those in power take note of how this is looking around the world and consider putting in those reinforcing clauses to protect freedom of speech and freedom of thought.
Or to repeal the law entirely, because this law it was tried in 5 councils across the country, and now, as you rightly point out, it's going to become national from the end of this month as we record in October, which means that all across the country, people could be arrested for silently praying in their own heads if they happen to be within 150 meters of an abortion center, because the government believes that strongly in protecting abortion over protecting human rights. Jeremiah, a colleague of yours, said human rights are for all people, no matter their view on abortion. So this isn't even about being pro-abortion or pro-life. This is about everyone having a human right. What about the European Court of Human Rights?
Well, they had an opportunity to hear a buffer zones case actually from the UK many years ago. Alina Delgariu was a woman who had benefited from support from pro-life volunteers, and when the first buffer zone came into Ealing in London, she challenged that, saying, me and my friends, we have benefit and we want to keep this option open for other women. We volunteer outside of clinics. We want to keep that help open. Can you reconsider, please, council, of the activities that you're banning? That case ultimately was unsuccessful, but it was appealed up to the European Court of Human Rights to step in to protect freedom of speech for these women. Unfortunately, the European Court of Human Rights declined to hear it. They declined to hear these vulnerable women. And so we're in this situation where these women's voices have not been heard, and often it's those who lose out as a result of this law, that do not get the airtime, that do not get enough attention or enough consideration in the making of these laws. We've had we've supported 4 cases already with people who've been unjustly accused of crimes because of buffer zones, Isabel von Spruce being the most well-known, and you took a great interest in that, Calvin, in sharing that story. And she had a great victory in the end, that she had a payout from police in the West Midlands for £13,000.
Amazing.
Showing a victory.
Yes.
And yet here we are a couple months later with the conviction. It just shows how vague and confusing these laws are. We have different decisions from different areas. It's not making any sense. We need clarity. We need to reinforce those basic human rights: freedom of thought, freedom of speech.
So when I saw Isabel von Spruce win that settlement of £13,000, the reward of £13,000, I thought, this is great. First of all, in UK terms, that's a large sum of money. That's a big return. However, I thought Adam would get a similar response. I did not think they would go through and charge him as guilty. But you mentioned in the European Court of Human Rights that these cases are not being heard. I find there's a pattern here, that cases that make it to the European Court of Human Rights are quite largely successful, but it's getting there in the first place that is the first hurdle. And now, of course, we have in the UK a government that is pushing to remove itself from the ECHR. Well, not necessarily government, but lots of high-profile politicians pushing to remove the country from the ECHR. Do you think that if we developed an English Bill of Rights, we'd have more or less protection than we do now?
It depends who's writing it. So it comes with, it would be fantastic to reinforce the right to free speech,
yes,
and the
and
right
freedom
to
of religion,
life, and all the right to freedom of religion, and the basic human rights that are enshrined in international law, and that we are all agreed upon. It would be fantastic to enshrine those more formally into the English legal system. But I do fear as to who would be writing the bill, and if so, will it be something that really does reinforce those rights? And I don't know at the moment in this country if we're settled enough on our grasp of what those rights mean.
Right.
So I'd love to see a future where we aim towards something like that. But I think we've got a bit of work to do before we get the clarity that we need.
I think you're right, and I wanted to raise that because I know a lot of my audience is very much in favour of scrapping the ECHR, but I think it's important to consider what might replace it before we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, Adam has been prosecuted by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. The name itself should ring alarm bells. Prosecuted by Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. Right. This is an area that has Christ in its name, Christ's body in its name, yet he's prosecuting a man for praying to Christ.
Worth noting as well that there was no victim of this crime. No member of the public saw Adam praying and was particularly disturbed as to call the police. No, it was the abortion facility that called the police on Adam. So, and then as we see, that's the council that are prosecuting. Now, Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council have been in the BBC this week for another reason. They are on the verge of bankruptcy. They've had to ask the government to step in for funding for essential services in their area for kids with special needs, because they are so short on money that they cannot afford these essential services. Right. This council spent £110,000 prosecuting Adam for his silent thought. For context, for those who don't look into cases very much, that is a vastly disproportionate sum of money for an offence like this at a magistrate's court. They hired a King's Counsel, one of the most expensive lawyers that you could find in the United Kingdom. They poured resources, taxpayers' money, into prosecuting Adam. I told my taxi driver about the case when I was on the way to court to the trial. He was furious, not because he was particularly pro-life, but because his car is getting wrecked with potholes, and the money that he's paying the council is going to prosecuting a man for his silent thought. This is outrageous use of taxpayer funds at a time where we need these services the most.
Especially since they're prosecuting him for an offence which carries a maximum penalty of £1,000. So they're willing to spend 100 grand on a maximum penalty of £1,000. Well, it shows that clearly they wanted to find him guilty. They wanted to charge him for this. Why do you think that is? The council in particular.
I could speculate and say perhaps they're looking to set an example. They're looking to set that cultural chill of if this man is prosecuted even for his silent prayers, then how much more can we be prosecuted for voicing a conversation about abortion or having or using our free speech in such a way, even if peaceful, even if helpful, and that would to see the punishment put on Adam. Now, to be clear, Adam was not fined for his crime. He was had a sentence with no charge, but the council sought for him to pay their costs, which is something that can happen in the UK. They tried to charge him £93,000. Adam is a man of humble means with 2 children to support. That would have devastated him financially forever. The judge instead limited his costs to £9,000, which is still incredibly significant.
Yep.
And it does serve as a chilling warning, which is not how these laws should be used or how these laws should work. It doesn't seem fair to Adam at all.
It doesn't seem fair to the British taxpayer that this council has wanted to bankrupt a father, and instead of spending money on special needs children, they've spent 100 grand on prosecuting this man for doing what? Standing there like this, silently, obscured by a tree, not even in the plain line of sight of this abortion centre. It's all abhorrent that this is happening. So he's been given a conditional discharge in order to pay this £9,000. Now, a conditional discharge, I believe that's like a suspended sentence.
Yes, similar. So he does not have to pay a penalty for his actions, but rather only the costs of the prosecution. So it's the best form of guilty that he could have got, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But of course, he still has a criminal conviction, and it still sends a very confusing message to the British public, because on one hand we know that we have freedom of thought and freedom of speech protected in law, and on the other hand they're prosecuting a man for his silent prayer because his head might have been slightly bowed. It doesn't make sense. It's very confusing. We need clarity.
And so Adam Smith Connor did not outwardly manifest his prayer by kneeling, speaking, or holding any signs. He made every effort to be out of the line of sight of the abortion facility. I think it's absurd. It's insane what's happening. Let's look at how the mainstream media is covering this story. BBC News. Praying man breached abortion clinic safe zone. Why do abortion clinics need safe zones? The wording around that is disgusting. How can people help in other ways? Is Adam seeking prayer? Is Adam on social media? Can he be found?
Adam certainly is seeking prayer, whether that's silent or vocal or otherwise, and he has very much valued the support that he's had from around the world. Right. He is available on Twitter under Southampton Pro-Life, and he very much values those who have supported him and prayed for him. So thank you for that on his behalf.
Not at all. I think people all around the world are going to be looking at this story thinking the UK has gone insane. They've just prosecuted a man for praying silently in his own head. It is thought crime. It is 1984 in 2024. It's difficult to comprehend, and I think we're going to be talking about this story for a long, long time to come. Lois McClatchy-Miller, thank you very much for covering this. Thank you for coming in today, and God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for watching my Common Sense Crusade. If you'd like to watch the whole show, you can subscribe to lotuseaters.com for as little as £5 per month, and then you get access to a bank of content as well. My show is 3 p.m. every Thursday. See you there. Deus Vult.